Sierra Leone in the time of COVID-19. The impact of the pandemic on frontliners, on business, and on our community. This is The Local Response, every week with Vickie Remoe. This is The Local Response in the heart of Freetown, and today I'm talking to Estelle Van Eeckhout. She is the country manager of Brussels Airlines, formerly SN Brussels. I'm here to find out what it's like to be running a travel company when the borders are closed and there are no flights. Hi Estelle, how are you?
Good morning, Vickie. How are you doing?
Pretty good. So what I want you to tell us is where you were a year ago. What was everyday business like?
Well, business as usual for us, Brussels Airlines, is to have 4 to 5 flights a week, flying in and out of Freetown. That means that having an office running from Monday to Saturday, with customers coming in, calling, emailing, also handling the travel agencies. So that's how it looked like, selling tickets and ensuring that flights come and leave.
Okay. And what is your business cycle like? What are the peak times of the year when you see the most, and then when does it taper down for you?
Peak seasons for the airlines in Sierra Leone are mostly Christmas and Easter, when a lot of people from abroad come to Sierra Leone to visit the families, and also a lot of people from Sierra Leone also go back to Europe or the US.
This December was a really, really big year for us. We had Idris Elba come to town. There's a lot of traffic. And I think in the sub-region as a whole, you know, this theme of the year of the return saw lots of people coming to the continent. But with the rise of the pandemic, borders have closed, flights have come to a complete stop. What were the early signs that your organization, Brussels, felt, or what were the earliest ways that you began to feel the pandemic on your business before the borders closed down?
Yeah, I think to your question, I will take a step back, and you said very rightly that it's a worldwide crisis. And I think that it came to Africa and to Sierra Leone very late compared to the Western world or to the Far East world, that is China. So I think as far as Sierra Leone is concerned, sometimes we tend to forget it's not only about Sierra Leone and not only about the aviation industry. It's worldwide, cross-industry, and I think we wonder what it will look like afterwards. For us in Sierra Leone, I think we were kind of, and by us I mean the people of Sierra Leone in the country, we were kind of protected until very late, and also not necessarily realizing what was going on in Europe. Or in the US or in China, all these lockdowns, etc., which actually started in China in early January, and then February, March in Europe. So we were protected. We didn't really realize what was going on. Of course, as an airline flying to and from Sierra Leone, we had a decrease of demand because the crisis was already going on in Asia and in Europe. So the first signs were really a decrease in the number of passengers. Then you also had some a little bit of tension. You can feel anxiety in people because not really knowing what was going on and what will go on the next day or the next week. So the first signs, I think, appeared in the course of February when we saw the first decrease of demand, customer asking for refunds, etc., of airline tickets.
When people started to cancel those flights or ask for refunds, what was your organization's position? Like, how did you react to that, and how did it impact your business?
Okay, well, as an airline, like most of other business, we are driven by demand, right? If a customer doesn't have a demand for a product or a service, you cannot deliver it, you cannot operate it, you cannot sell it, basically. So I think worldwide, all airlines, as the demand was decreasing, had to adapt their schedule to meet the customer demand. And that is valid for airlines because flying an aircraft half empty or 10% filled in, of course, just doesn't make sense from a financial perspective. But that's also valid for any other kind of companies where the demand has been decreasing and who are not able to sell their product anymore. They had to stop operations as well in production. So.
Okay. For your own staff that work within the airline industry, did you put any measures in place to protect them, to kind of say, okay, fine, this is a pandemic, we're pulling back, but we're still working? How did you protect your staff?
in terms of staff protection, in Europe, the system is much more helpful and really helpful towards companies and staff during crisis time. So you have that kind of technical unemployment system, etc.
Like social security,
which is in most of sub-Saharan Africa countries, you don't really find this kind of system put in place by government. So in Sierra Leone, we keep our staff on board with a reduced working time. But for us and for the staff as well, the most important, of course, it's to work and have a salary at the end of the month, but it's also to reply to customers and ensuring that we have a presence here. We face a lot of very anxious people because when you're stuck here for the last 2 months, you don't know when you will be able to go back. We have some people that are anxious, and although we are not always able to provide an answer that is certain in terms of a date or facts, I think just the fact that we are open and that we are here and that our staff is there to answer to customers, and we still have customers walking in the office actually, not a lot of them, but some of them, because there is also the culture of coming to visit, etc. I think people appreciate that. It's important for our staff as well. We have a staff that is very engaged towards customers, and the fact that they can continue to work for them is a pride, but also something that keeps them throughout the crisis.
Absolutely. No, I think it's really important what you just said, this idea of staying open, that business may have changed, but that you stay open. And by being open, there's this thing that is reaffirmed in the customer's mind of kind of trust and confidence, that even though you can't serve us directly, the fact that you can, even if it's just information you're providing, builds this association and positive feeling like, oh, you guys are here with us. And I think that definitely reduces the feeling of anxiety, which everyone can feel right now. One of the things I remember is that Brussels was actually one of the few airlines, if not the only airline, that stayed open during Ebola. So I'd like to hear how that experience, or dealing with that particular crisis, which at the time was local and regional, has maybe perhaps prepared you for something like this, if at all.
I think the context is very different. During the time of Ebola, it was 3 countries very close to each other that were touched. The rest of the world was untouched, let's say. So the decision about whether you remain in the country, you continue your service to the country, was really country per country. Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and the company, Brussels Airlines, made the decision to continue to fly to those countries. Today, the situation is almost the contrary, I would say. It's not that Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia have an issue. The whole world has an issue, and the whole world doesn't justify that we can fly aircraft anymore.
Of course.
So I think it's different. What I think is helped, of course, is the experience of handling a pandemic, whether it's by the staff, but also, I mean, in general, in Sierra Leone, I've seen it. I was there during the end of Ebola, and I'm here now. I am pretty sure that going back to washing their hands, preventing physical contact, etc., has been much easier to implement for Sierra Leonean than for French people or Belgian people, because they've never lived that before. I think in Sierra Leone, those preventive measures were more easily implemented.
One of the things you touched on earlier was this issue of like social services that governments in Europe are able to provide to kind of cushion the effect of the pandemic on the welfare of staff, because staff are citizens, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things I want to talk to you about and hear your opinion on is this issue of taxation, or business taxation during this kind of crisis and pandemic. What kind of measures do you think are important from the government side towards business and private sector to cushion, employers as well?
In normal times, I think, yes, taxation is something that matters very much to private sector. Now, I think what we are seeing across the world at the moment is some supporting rules or derogation for private companies in terms of taxation. We, the airlines in Sierra Leone, the Board of Airline Representatives, have asked for a delay, for example, in the payment of the passenger tax to the government, which was accepted, and which is very relieving from a cash perspective. The problem at the moment for airlines is cash management, is how to ensure that we have enough cash until the end of the crisis so that we can continue running. So this gesture from the Sierra Leonean government was very helpful. I know it happens as well in other countries, in Africa and across the world, and in other sectors as well. And I think this support is important. Yeah.
No, I think whether you're private sector or an individual, this idea that cash flow management is actually the key concern both on the individual and the corporate level, because nobody knows how long it will last. So you may have a cash flow right now that looks healthy, but is it healthy in 6 months? Is it healthy in 9 months? So no, that's spot on. As we look to, I mean, in the US and I know in parts of Europe, communities are starting to open up, lockdowns are ending, and people are kind of going into this post-pandemic, post-lockdown world. What ways do you think that the airline industry, I don't know if you could paint a picture for us, like how do you think it's going to look? Is there already projections? Are you guys brainstorming like, okay, when people are coming, are we going to now see people washing their hands before you get on planes globally? Like, what do you think is going to happen when the airline industry opens up again?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure anybody on earth knows, because I think what this crisis have learned to all of us is that things are uncertain and can change very rapidly. From an airline perspective, I think there are so many different parameters that are to be taken into account before you can actually start to think flying to somewhere.
Of course.
The first one is, of course, the state authorities, whether your country is open or not
of course.
to travelers, to what kind of travelers. In Europe, for example, you have Schengen, and they said, okay, for Schengen travelers, but not outside Schengen travelers. Right. So you have all that authorities regulation, basically. Then you have also the authorities regulation about what will government ask airlines to do
to protect passengers
and staff, etc. During the travels. That is also something that for now is not really clear to anyone, or is still moving. So we have that factors from governments, and you can imagine when you fly to 100 countries, if you had 100 different rules, that is very difficult to handle and to actually plan how to manage that. And then you have the demands, the demand of the customer.
Of course.
Who will be willing to travel? When? To where? When you know that foreign affairs ministries are still banning, or asking people not to travel, actually. And then you have also the corporate world, corporate companies who have still worked through the crisis. Most of the staff work from home. Yeah. And it worked.
No, yeah, I just saw
Zoom
something.
Meeting worked very well.
Yeah, I saw Facebook announcing that staff will be giving the option to permanently work from home, and Twitter as well. So it's a new world, yeah.
Probably there is also that thing that companies will realize that maybe out of, I don't know, I'm just guessing, out of 10 trips, maybe 1 or 2 only are necessary. The rest can be done remotely. We don't know that yet. I mean, we don't really...
Which has so many ramifications for travel, like locally and internationally. These conferences are now all going to be Zoom conferences. You know, what does that do for the airlines? Yeah.
So it's so we have this part of the state, we have this part about the demand, and I think it's very tricky to find out when, how, what, who, where. Absolutely, yeah. So I think it's quite tough to plan. So I do think companies try to plan a restart. Outside of the aviation industry, it's also difficult for private company. When you don't know what the market will look like, what the world will look like, it's very difficult to plan an exit of the crisis. Airlines, of course, it's maybe we were probably the first hit. The aviation industry were the first hit by the crisis, because it's all about people moving in and out, isolation, etc. So we were the first hit by the crisis. We will probably be the last one to recover from it.
Of course.
I think some studies are showing that the demand for air travel that was there in 2019 will only be recovered by 2023 or something like that. Okay. So that's...
And these are just projections, because no one really even knows. Yeah.
So what people need to understand as well is that starting to fly again is not the end of the crisis.
No, absolutely. You only think that way if you're stuck somewhere right now.
Yeah.
So you're thinking, oh, once the planes start, I can go to where I need to go. But clearly for the industry to be sustaining or profitable, who knows?
Just like in Europe, governments are really saying it out loud. It's not because the lockdown is over that the crisis is over.
Of course.
And I think it's like this for aviation industry. It's like this for all industry. It will take time to recover the level of demand on most of goods and services also across the world. Also because actually a lot of people also had a decrease of revenue, went to unemployment.
Absolutely.
So the purchasing power is also changing, and we don't really know how this will evolve in the future. So.
No, it is. It is the world unknown. It's a whole new world. So what do you think needs to happen in the post-pandemic period to increase or encourage more customer trust in airlines or in traveling, to build that, okay, it is safe to travel feeling in potential customers?
I think there is several answers to your question. The first one is about communication of the protocols and what the governments want airlines, or what even the governments want to put in place. I think once we have a clear visibility in terms of what is expected from governments, whether it's from Sierra Leone, Belgium, etc., you then can actually plan how you will restart and what you need to put in place. So for me, the one central thing is, what is it expected from us? The second thing, of course, we are an intercontinental airlines. Of course, we will obey rules that will be dictated. Now, of course, there had been some discussions about leaving a seat free in the aircraft, etc. Those are not measures that have been
mandated. Yes.
So I think the world is still looking at what is the best way. What is the best way, of course, to protect passengers and staff, but also what is the best way so that companies still can generate revenue and make profit, because I don't know any airlines that will fly with their flights not being profitable, basically.
Of course.
Yeah? This is why airlines open and close destinations. So I think it's what we will need to do really depends on what the authorities will ask. And then, of course, I mean, in general, we know our passengers. We know also that this crisis brings a lot of questioning about medical health, etc. And we will of course, comply and try to reassure passengers as much as possible. But for sure, Brussels Airlines is a European airlines. Europe has probably the most restrictive rules in terms of passenger handling and care, and this will of course be applied to whatever we do.
Okay, and this is my last question, very personal. When planes take off again, where would you most like to travel to? Where are you dreaming of? Or are you dreaming of anywhere at all?
Well, my parents and part of my family is in Paris, so that will probably be my primary destination. If I would fly out with the first aircraft, I don't think so, because I think the restart will be a teamwork as well, and we will have to look after passenger, ensuring that everybody gets what they need, and I will be there for that.
That was Estelle Van Eeckhout. She's the country manager for Brussels Airlines here in Sierra Leone, and she just gave us a brief overview of the impact of the pandemic on travel industry and aviation locally and globally. The fact is, we don't know what the world of travel is going to look like at the end of this pandemic. It's going to take a long time for the aviation industry and for all business and life in general to go back to any kind of normalcy. Maybe it will be a new normal. But there are things that we can do every day, both at work and at home, to continue to protect ourselves from the coronavirus. Please practice hand hygiene. Wash your hands as often as possible with soap. Should you not have soap, don't forget to use your hand sanitizer. And when you do go out into public and you are shopping, doing groceries, just going about your day-to-day, make sure to wear your face mask to protect yourself and your community. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.